The power went out at 8:14 a.m. It didn't flicker. It just died. The hum of the refrigerator cut out, leaving my small house on the edge of town in total, suffocating silence. Outside, the blizzard was burying the Midwest in white. Inside, the temperature began to drop. I lit a few candles in the kitchen and grabbed a flashlight. I was used to winter storms. I had blankets, I had books, and I had a landline that usually worked even when the cell towers froze up. I was pouring a glass of wine when the knock came. It wasn't a frantic banging. It was 3 solid, polite raps on the front door. I hesitated. I lived alone, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I moved to the peephole, flashlight off, and peered out. Standing on my porch, shivering in the swirling snow, was a man. I recognized him vaguely. He drove a blue sedan, lived maybe 3 or 4 houses down. I'd seen him wave once or twice. Standing next to him were 2 kids, a boy and a girl, huddled against his legs. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just enough to block the wind. "I'm so sorry to bother you," the man said. He gave a tight, apologetic smile. His face was red from the cold. "I'm Mark, from down the street. Our furnace died about 2 hours ago. We tried to wait it out, but the house is freezing, and with the power out," he gestured to the kids, "I was hoping we could just warm up here for an hour until the road crews come through." The girl, maybe 8 years old, looked up at me. Her eyelashes were clumped with ice. She didn't say a word. "Yeah," I said, stepping back. The cold was already cutting through my sweater. "Yeah, of course. Come in." They stepped inside, stamping snow onto the mat. The man, Mark, put a hand on the boy's shoulder to guide him in. I noticed the boy flinch, a sharp, jerky movement, before stepping quickly onto the rug. "Thank you, Sarah," Mark said. "He knew my name. I'll get some blankets," I said, "and I can heat up some water on the gas stove for cocoa." "That would be a lifesaver," he said. We settled in the living room. I placed a cluster of candles on the coffee table. The flames threw long, dancing shadows against the walls, making the familiar room look distorted. Mark sat in the armchair. The 2 kids, Lucas and Maya, sat on the sofa. They sat rigidly, knees pressed together, hands folded in their laps. They looked like porcelain dolls placed on a shelf. "You guys okay?" I asked, handing Maya a mug of hot chocolate. She didn't take it. Her eyes darted to Mark. Mark nodded just once, a subtle dip of his chin. Only then did Maya reach out and take the mug. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was so quiet it was almost swallowed by the wind outside. "They're a little shy," Mark said, leaning back. The candlelight caught his eyes, making them look hollow. "Rough night. We're all a bit rattled." I sat on the other end of the sofa. "So how long have you lived down the street?" I asked. "I feel like I've barely seen you guys." "About 6 months," Mark said easily. "I work in sales, so I travel a lot. Lucas and Maya are homeschooled, so we keep to ourselves mostly." "It must be hard," I said, "traveling." "It has its moments." He took a sip of his cocoa. "You live here alone, right? That big house, just you?" The question was casual, but the air in the room seemed to get heavier. "Yeah," I lied. "Well, my boyfriend is a trucker. He is on a run, but he'll be back in the morning." Mark smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Good for you. Safety in numbers." The hours dragged on. The storm didn't let up. Every time I looked at the kids, they were staring at the floor or at Mark. Never at me. They didn't fight. They didn't fidget. They didn't complain about the cold. They just existed, terrified and silent. Around midnight, I stood up. "Look, the roads aren't clearing. You guys should just crash here. The kids can take the guest room. Mark, you can take the couch." "That is too generous," Mark said, standing up. He towered over me in the dim light. "We really appreciate it." I showed the kids to the guest room. As I tucked a blanket around Lucas, I leaned in. "Hey," I whispered, "do you need anything else?" Lucas looked at the door where Mark was waiting in the hallway, watching. The boy's lip trembled, but he shook his head. I went to my room and locked the door. It was a habit, but tonight, I engaged the deadbolt I'd had installed on the bedroom door too. Something felt wrong. My stomach was twisting, a primal instinct screaming that the energy in the house had shifted. I lay in bed, listening. For a long time, there was only the wind. Then, the creak of a floorboard. It was slow, deliberate. Outside my door, I held my breath. The handle of my bedroom door turned, gently, then harder. It was locked. Silence. Then, a low, scratching sound. Metal on metal. He was picking the lock. My blood ran cold. No, that's not right. My blood stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached for my cell phone. Dead battery. I had forgotten to charge it before the outage. The door clicked. It swung open, revealing a silhouette backlit by the faint gray light of the hallway. Mark. He didn't say anything. He stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. In his hand, he held a roll of duct tape. "You lied, Sarah," he whispered. His voice was different now. The suburban dad act was gone. It was flat, cold, and amused. "There is no boyfriend coming home," he lunged. I screamed and kicked out, catching him in the shin. He grunted, but grabbed my ankle, dragging me down the mattress. He was strong, too strong. He pinned my wrists with one hand, the weight of his body crushing the air out of my lungs. "Shh," he hissed, bringing the tape down toward my mouth. "Don't make this messy." Suddenly, the hallway light flickered on. The power had surged back. "Get off her." It wasn't a man's voice. It was a child's scream. Mark froze. He looked over his shoulder. Lucas was standing in the doorway. He was holding my heavy cast iron skillet from the kitchen. He was shaking, tears streaming down his face, but he didn't lower the pan. "Lucas, go back to bed," Mark said. His tone was terrifyingly calm. "Daddy's just talking." "You are not our dad," Lucas screamed. The words hung in the air, shattering the illusion. Mark snarled, shoving off me and turning toward the boy. "You little brat," sirens. Blue and red lights flashed against the bedroom window, cutting through the snow. Car doors slammed outside. Heavy boots pounded on the porch. "Polis, open up." Mark looked at the window, then at the door. The mask of control slipped completely. For a second, he looked like a cornered animal. He bolted for the window, smashing the glass with his elbow, but he was too slow. I heard the front door get kicked in downstairs. "Upstairs, go, go." 2 officers stormed the bedroom with guns drawn before Mark could clear the sill. They tackled him into the shards of glass and snow. I sat on the bed, gasping for air, clutching my sheets. Lucas dropped the skillet. It hit the floor with a deafening clang. Maya ran in from the hallway and buried her face in my chest, sobbing. Later, after they dragged Mark out in cuffs, an officer sat with me in the kitchen. The power was back on, the lights humming, making everything look stark and bright. "We got a 911 call from your landline," the officer said gently. "A little girl," she whispered the address and said, "The bad man is hurting the lady." I looked over at Maya. She was wrapped in a foil blanket, drinking juice. She looked tiny. Did the dad confirm who he was?" I asked, my voice shaking. "He said they live down the street." The officer paused. He looked at his notepad, then back at me. His expression was grim. "Sarah," he said, "that man isn't Mark, and he doesn't live on this street. We've been tracking a vehicle matching his sedan across 3 states. He glanced at the kids. "Those children were reported missing from a park in Ohio 4 months ago. Their parents have been looking for them every day since." My stomach dropped out of me. I felt sick. I thought about the cocoa. I thought about the way Mark had put his hand on Lucas's shoulder to guide him inside. I thought about the way the kids had looked at him before accepting a drink. They weren't shy. They were conditioned. As they walked him to the squad car, Mark looked back at the house. He saw me standing in the window. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He just winked. "I haven't unlocked my front door in 3 days, and I don't think I ever will again for a stranger. Not even if they have kids. Because the scariest part wasn't the attack. It wasn't the lock-picking. It was realizing that for 4 hours, I sat in the dark, sharing hot chocolate with a monster, and I smiled at him because I thought he was just a dad trying to keep his family warm." The sound was impossible to ignore. It sliced through the cold air like a jagged knife. A dull, rhythmic scrape against the road. Then silence, only to come back again. Closer, sharper. It had been going on for hours now, its path unchanging. My eyes flickered toward the window, even though I didn't want to look, but there it was again. The old truck with the plow attachment, passing by just outside. I hadn't seen it earlier, but now that it was here, it was impossible to ignore. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. The computer screen in front of me was dull and empty, the blackness creeping in around the edges. I was supposed to be working, but my mind kept slipping away from the task at hand. The storm outside made everything feel so distant. The snow piled up around the house, muffling the world beyond. It was the kind of night where the cold seeps in even when you are indoors. The plow's scrape turned louder as it passed by again, sending a shiver through my arms. I pushed myself back from the desk, leaning back in the creaky chair. Why was it still out there? I adjusted the headphones on my head, but the sound of the truck wasn't enough to drown out the strange sense of unease creeping in. I clicked around on the screen, pretending to do something productive, but my mind was elsewhere, searching for something it couldn't grasp. Something was wrong. I could feel it, and I couldn't shake it off. The screen in front of me blinked, then went dark. Sleep mode. The sudden blackness swallowed the screen, and I exhaled, briefly looking around the room. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was then that I saw it. In the black glass of the screen, a faint outline. At first, I thought it was just the dim reflection of my desk lamp, but it wasn't. There, standing behind me, just outside the sliding glass door, was a figure. I froze. The figure was tall, obscured by the dark outside, but I could make out the outline of a man standing in the snow, his features too faint to distinguish. The faint reflection caught his face, distorted in the glass. He was watching me. His head was slightly tilted, almost as if he had been standing there for a while, waiting. I couldn't move. I reached for my phone, but my fingers were stiff, trembling, as though they didn't belong to me. I fumbled with the screen, trying to unlock it, but the phone wouldn't respond. The air in the room felt hot. I had to get up, had to do something, but the sweat on my palms made it hard to get a grip. The figure outside didn't move, didn't even blink. The only thing that changed was that I could see him more clearly now, standing just behind me, his breath fogging the glass. I felt the pulse in my neck, a heavy thud against my throat. The man outside hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I heard the scrape of boots against the snow outside. They were heavy, slow, deliberate. The footsteps were muffled at first, but the sound grew closer, closer until I could hear them clearly in the house. He was here. I jumped up from the chair, heart pounding. I grabbed my phone again and tried to call 911, but the signal was gone. The line just buzzed with a cold, empty static. No service. I staggered to the basement door, yanking it open and slamming it behind me. The wooden stairs creaked under my feet as I descended into the dark. I didn't bother turning on the light. My eyes were already adjusted to the shadows. I just had to keep moving. The storm outside howled through the cracks in the house, but that was nothing compared to the noise that filled my mind. I rushed to the window, slipping my hand into the cold frame. The metal was ice cold against my fingertips. I twisted the latch, shoving it open, and pulled myself up and out into the freezing night air. My breath misted in the cold. I didn't dare look back. The truck was idling in the driveway, the lights off but the engine still running low and steady. The door of the truck was wide open, the interior light glowing faintly, casting a dim yellow hue across the snow. There was no one in the driver's seat. I didn't stop to think. I ran hard, fast, my feet slipping in the snow, the cold air burning my lungs. The wind pushed against me, and I struggled to keep my balance. The neighbor's house was just a few hundred yards away, and I could see the light from their window in the distance, flickering like a lifeline. My breath came in ragged bursts. The snow beneath my feet was thick, but it didn't slow me down. I needed to get to Jack's house, to the safety of someone else, someone who would believe me. When I reached the door, I knocked frantically, my fingers numb as they pounded on the wood. Jack didn't ask questions when he opened the door. He just saw my face, saw the snow, soaked socks, and pulled me inside. The police arrived a short time later, trudging through the snow with flashlights in hand. They didn't seem to have any idea what was going on, just following me as I led them back to the house. They kept looking over their shoulders, probably as uncertain as I was. The front door was wide open when we reached the house. The interior of the house was dark, except for the light that flickered weakly from the fridge in the kitchen. But the silence, that silence, was what hit me first. The damage wasn't what I'd expected. The furniture wasn't overturned. There were no broken windows, no shattered glass. Everything was too controlled. The couch had been slashed, but not with the wild abandon I'd anticipated. The seams were methodically cut, each slash deliberate and even. I moved into the kitchen, feeling my throat tighten with every step. My toothbrush sat in the center of the table. It was wet, and the bristles were pink. He hadn't just used it. He'd scrubbed until his gums bled. I gagged, the sensation rising in the back of my throat. I turned away, trying to focus on anything else. But the house was full of subtle signs of a presence that had been here before I even arrived. I turned my attention to the whiteboard in the living room. The message on it was short, too casual for something that should have been terrifying. But the more I stared at it, the more it sank in. "You sleep too heavy." The words were simple, but they were damning. They spoke of someone who had been inside, watching me, knowing me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I processed the implication. He had been watching me. He had been there the entire time. The police officer cleared his throat behind me, asking if I wanted to make a report. But the only thing I could focus on was the pounding in my ears. The scraping, faint but unmistakable. The plow was still out there. Even now, in the quiet of Jack's guest room, I don't hear the wind. I hear metal dragging on asphalt over and over. I can still hear it, the scrape of the plow against the road. The same rhythm, the same cadence. It never stops. The first time I saw the light, I told myself it was a reflection. I live at the end of a dead-end road where the pavement stops and the woods take over. In the winter, the tree line feels like a wall. It was a Tuesday, maybe 11 o'clock p.m. I was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water, when I saw it through the sliding glass door. A single, steady orange glow, deep in the trees. It wasn't a flashlight beam sweeping around. It was a stationary point of light, a campfire. I stood there in the dark kitchen, the cold from the glass radiating against my chest, just watching it. It was too small to be a bonfire. It looked controlled. I watched for 5 minutes, waiting for it to move, for a car engine to start, for something, but it just burned, a tiny pinprick of heat in the frozen blackness. Eventually, the cold seeping through the floorboards drove me back to bed. Kids, I told myself. Teenagers drinking in the woods. The next morning, the snow told a different story. I went out to the backyard with my coffee. The snow was pristine, a flat white sheet, except for the tracks. They came out of the tree line on the far left, cut a wide arc across the middle of my yard, and disappeared back into the woods on the right. They didn't come to the door. They didn't check the windows. It was a perfect semicircle, a patrol path. I walked out to the tracks. The boots were big, heavy winter treads. The spacing was even. Whoever it was hadn't been running or sneaking. They had been walking, pacing, watching the house from 100 distinct angles that night. I locked the deadbolt twice. I pulled the blinds tight, but at 10:45 p.m., I couldn't help myself. I went to the upstairs window, the one that looks out over the backyard, and peeked through the slats. The light was back, same spot, maybe a little closer. For 3 nights, this became the routine. The light would appear. I would pretend not to see it. In the morning, I'd find new tracks. One morning, the tracks were closer to the fence. The next, they were crisscrossed, as if he had stood in one spot for an hour, shifting his weight, just staring at my living room window. By Friday, the fear had turned into a dull, grinding exhaustion. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night. I was angry. When I saw the orange glow flare up again around midnight, something snapped. I didn't think about the danger. I just wanted him gone. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my heavy coat, and took the high-beam flashlight from the garage. I marched out the back door, the snow crunching loudly under my feet. I wanted him to hear me. I wanted to scare him off. I followed the tracks into the tree line. The air got quieter instantly, the wind blocked by the pines. The smell of wood smoke hit me first, acrid and strong. I crested a small ridge, and there he was. It was a small clearing. A tarp was strung up between 2 trees to block the wind. A small fire crackled in a dugout pit. And sitting on a log, hands extended toward the warmth, was a man. He didn't run. He didn't jump. He just slowly turned his head as my flashlight beam hit him. He was wearing a heavy parka, a ski mask rolled up like a beanie, and thick snow pants. He looked normal bored even. "You are on private property," I snapped. My voice sounded thin in the cold air. The man blinked, shielding his eyes from my light. He didn't look aggressive. He looked like an accountant who had decided to go camping. "Technically," he said, his voice calm, "the property line ends at the ridge. This is state land." "You're watching my house," I said. "I see the tracks, Eric." He paused. I hadn't told him my name. He gestured vaguely toward my house with a gloved hand. "You changed your schedule tonight. Usually the kitchen goes dark at 10:15 a.m. Tonight, you kept the lights on until 11:30 a.m. Hard to track the baseline when you vary the variables." My stomach dropped. He wasn't taunting me. He was complaining, like I was a glitch in his data. "What are you talking about?" I stepped back, gripping the flashlight like a club. "Who are you?" he sighed, standing up. He wasn't huge, but the heavy clothes made him look imposing. He kicked a little snow onto the fire. "Just observing patterns, energy usage, sleep cycles, isolation behavior. It's rare to find a subject this consistent." He looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that were terrifyingly dull. There was no malice, just observation. "You should go back inside, Eric," he said softly. "You are ruining the data set." I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I turned and sprinted back through the trees, slipping on the ice until I crashed through my back door and locked it. I called the police immediately. It took them 40 minutes to get out to the house. I sat in the hallway with a kitchen knife, staring at the door. When the cruiser finally pulled up, I led the 2 officers out to the woods, shaking so bad I could barely hold the flashlight. The clearing was empty. The fire was dead, just a pile of wet, black ash. The tarp was gone. The man was gone. Probably a squatter, one officer said, kicking the snow. "Moved on once you spotted him." "No," I said. "He knew my name. He knew my schedule." "Hey, over here," the other officer called out. He was standing near a tree stump about 10 feet from the fire pit. Sitting on top of it was a plastic milk crate. The officer shone his light inside. It wasn't trash. It was paper. I walked over, and the breath left my lungs. The crate was filled with photos, hundreds of them. They were printed on cheap paper, curling from the cold. They were all of me eating cereal at the counter, me sitting at my computer, taken from the tree line with a zoom lens, me sleeping on the couch, taken through the living room window. The officer picked up a notebook that was wedged between the stacks of photos. He flipped it open. It was a log. Jan 12, subject awoke 7 o'clock a.m. Coffee. Screen time 8 hours. Jan 13, subject left residence 2 o'clock p.m. Returned 3:30 p.m. grocery bags. Jan 14, subject stood at window. Suspect awareness increasing. The handwriting was cramped and precise. The officer flipped to the very last page. The ink was fresh. Jan 20, confrontation occurred. Subject breached containment zone. Interaction complete. Data sufficiency achieved. Below that, underlined twice, leave gear. Time to move on. Loop back later. The police took the crate. They searched the woods for 3 hours, but the tracks just led to a service road and vanished. They promised extra patrols, told me to get an alarm system. I moved out a week later. I broke my lease, paid the penalty, and moved into an apartment complex in the city. Somewhere with neighbors on all sides and streetlights that never go out. But I still have trouble sleeping. I keep thinking about that last line in the notebook. Loop back later. He didn't leave the photos because he was scared. He didn't leave them because he was in a rush. He left them because he was done with them. I wasn't a person to him. I was just a completed project. And somewhere else, in some other patch of woods behind a quiet house, I know there's a small orange light flickering in the trees, and someone else is being watched, right now, by a man who is just waiting for his data to be complete.